Welcome, everyone. I'm Mike Magee, the CEO of Chiefs for Change, a bipartisan network of state and district education chiefs from across the country, serving more than 7 million students. And I'm joined today by three of our members, Sonia Santelices, the CEO of Baltimore City Public Schools, LaTanya Goffney, the superintendent of Aldine Independent School District in Texas, and Carrie Wright, the state superintendent in Mississippi. Shortly after the pandemic hit, Chiefs for Change put out a report based on the work of our members called The Return, which identified 4 areas of redesign work that needed to take place during the pandemic in order for students to be served as well as they deserve to be served during this difficult time. And those 4 areas were redesigning time, the role that the calendar year played and the daily schedule played in the lives of students, redesigning the role that people played in our systems, the role of every adult in a school community, redesigning our social, emotional, and mental health supports for students as they return to school, and then also redesigning the way that our curricula worked, the way that our curriculum assessments worked, and the training that we provided to teachers, the support we provided to teachers to use high quality instructional materials well. At least 2 of those areas of redesign work will be part of our conversation today, really talking about the role that high quality instructional materials have played during this time as students have moved online in significant numbers, as teachers have needed support in order to learn how to instruct online effectively, and the redesign of the roles of adults in our systems, thinking more and more about a team of adults that can support an individual student during this time and in the aftermath of the pandemic. So I'm very, very excited to talk with our panelists today. We could not have a better group of leaders to talk about these issues in detail. And I wanted to start with a question for all of you, which is, what has changed between the spring and what you saw then and the fall in terms of what you've been able to accomplish for students? What are the main high impact adjustments that you've made between spring and fall that have really made a difference for kids and teachers? And Sonia, why don't we start with you, and then we can have Carrie and LaTanya speak as well.
Sure. No, and it's great to be here with 2 wonderful colleagues, plus Mike, of course. So I want to say that I have great respect for both LaTanya and Carrie and the work that they're lifting on behalf of kids. I think when I reflect on some of the biggest changes between spring and where we are now, I would say spring was definitely kind of a haphazard, let's just piece something together, right? To make sure kids were connected to some kind of learning opportunity. I think in September, and we were a district that began all virtual, I think even within that frame, there was a real focus, and we heard loud and clear from our families that they wanted real learning to be occurring. They wanted their young people, their students, to actually be engaged in the learning process. And so one of the big things was teachers were far more comfortable with those platforms than they were in the spring. And the summer gave us the opportunity to really look at what are the ways we can leverage our curriculum learning standards in a virtual environment, albeit not something that people had years and years of training on, but one that enabled us to begin the school year. And I can say, as a mom of 2 girls in the district, I could even see it in terms of what they were actually learning, what the expectations were. And that was a huge shift. And then I think also really thinking through different uses of time and more time, for example, for interventions and small group work, even though it was and is virtual. One of the things that we're seeing, whether it's at the high school level or in lower grades, is that the huge infusion of technology has enabled us to look at interventions very, very differently than we might have before because of the investment that we've made. And we've heard feedback from families that they see the difference as well.
Well, in Mississippi, we, in March, as everybody did, what jumped out at us very quickly was the divide around connectivity and the divide around who had devices and who did not. And it was glaring. And so we worked very closely and very quickly with our legislature, and they had to get them to appropriate $200 million for a statewide digital learning initiative. And we immediately pivoted to that to make sure that we were then purchasing 390,000 devices so that every child and every teacher had a device. We wanted to make sure that there were high quality instructional materials that were available. We found out that not all of our districts had learning management systems. So this gave us the funds to ensure that we could purchase learning management systems for all of our districts on which they can load the high quality instructional materials, and making sure that that was across our state. We also started expanding and enhancing connectivity. Part of this money went to districts wanting to build cell towers, some wanted data plans, some wanted just individual hotspots, but we allowed them to let us know what they needed, and that's how we purchased that. We also have set up a huge professional development team because we knew that just handing over a device wasn't going to be sufficient. Teachers and students and parents were telling us they needed help. They needed help in how to utilize these devices. So professional development has been one thing we pivoted to immediately virtually, and we have continued that throughout the summer and into the fall. And last but not least, we added to this initiative an additional access and an expansion of telehealth and teletherapy. We were hearing from our teachers and our parents and our students, there was a lot of stress, a lot of emotional issues that were transpiring. And so I worked immediately with the Medical Association, the Pediatric Association, the University of Mississippi Medical Center, family physicians. I mean, we all came together as one unit to think, how can we expand telehealth and teletherapy across our state so the children can not only have access to physical health needs, but have the social and emotional needs met as well. So that we feel really good about where we are, and now it's time to really double down on our professional development for everybody that's concerned.
And I guess I would definitely echo what my colleagues Carrie and Sonia have said. And Mike, thank you so much for this opportunity to share the stage with them. In Texas, March 6th for us in Aldine, Texas, was the last normal school day. And I remember it because it was a Friday right before spring break. And as the number of cases were increasing and the positivity rates, and everyone was talking about coronavirus and COVID-19, and no one really knew what it meant, but we recognized it. There wasn't a playbook on how to prepare. And so initially we thought we were going to only close for a couple of days, but when we saw that it could be an extended period of time, we recognized that we had to immediately set up at-home learning opportunities and a website and everything to provide our students who were learning at home. And then one of the things that was quite glaring, and we all knew it beforehand, but it was in our faces afterwards, was the fact that our students didn't have devices. In the spring, what was much more different was the challenge of making sure our kids could connect. If we expected them to learn at home and they didn't have devices to learn at home, it was going to be a challenge. And so one of the first things we did is we had to determine who had what. And so we went and we looked at the devices that we had in our district, and we recognized, since we weren't one-to-one, that was going to be a priority. We had initially started with one per family, and so they had to share. So meanwhile, we're getting our students devices, but then we had a learning management system that no one had used. We'd had it for 5 years and we weren't using it, Carrie. And so we had to get all 4,000 or so teachers trained. And so our professional learning department was working on the back end to get teachers trained and set that up. In addition, I was shocked. You know, I'm a country girl. I started out in a small school district, and I'm accustomed to connectivity challenges. And, you know, when you're in a country, you may not have service here and you may not have service there, but I'm in Houston, Texas, and there were connectivity issues. And I was like, what? I'm in Houston. And that certainly is the truth. And so we had to work with our mayor and our county judge and local elected officials to address the connectivity issues. And through a partnership with TA, we were ordering devices. And guess what? They were on back order. And consequently, I mean, there are devices that we ordered in April that we still haven't received, but that's another conversation. But so we were putting in orders, but everybody was putting in orders. So I would say the main thing in the spring is we were putting pieces together. We were responding the best that we could, and our families were very appreciative. We recognized too, I share the fact that being a child of poverty, last place I wanted to be was at home, being raised by my grandmother and not having the support and the resources that most students have. And fortunately for me, I get to work in a district with students who are just like that. But unfortunately, they were faced with the challenges of being at home. And so our social emotional department that we were putting together in response to our strategic plan, we had to solidify it and start moving quickly to address some of the social emotional needs of our students. In addition, we had teachers who had cares and concerns and worries and different little experiences. It's because it was just coming out. Many people were trying to figure out who would be affected and impacted and so on and so forth. And so there were many emotional challenges that we also had to address. And lastly, I would say the hardest thing too was making sure that learning was still occurring. And so while we were concerned about all of the social emotional piece, we were concerned about learning, and then we were also concerned about our students eating. And I know Sonia and I and all of the superintendents across the nation are proud of the great job that our child nutrition department did in making sure that our students were fed and that their other needs were met while learning was occurring as well. So that's what I would say.
Mike, I think you're on mute.
You're still on mute.
Elena?
Refreshing the page. If you hit refresh up at the top of the browser, that should hopefully reset you.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Sure.
Never know. I want to take just a second to underscore something that Latanya and Carrie both said, which was there were heroic efforts in the spring on the part of certainly all Chiefs for Change's members and superintendents across the country to close the digital divide for their students. And thankfully, that was largely successful. But we are going to need the federal government to make that sustainable. If we're going to permanently close the digital divide, we need the federal government to help us to do that. And it's certainly something that we are going to be talking about in the new year and are very committed to making happen. So the work saved students in so many ways in the spring and into the summer. But there's an effort on the other side of the new year to make this sustainable that's very, very important. Sonia and Latanya, I wanted to shift to talk about high quality instructional materials specifically. I know that both of you have done a great deal of important work over the last couple of years to adopt high quality instructional materials, to support your teachers to implement those materials effectively. And both of you actually adopted Great Minds Wit and Wisdom ELA curriculum, so you have that in common. What have high quality instructional materials made possible for you during this time that might not otherwise have been possible had you, had a kind of mixed bag of curricular materials across your system?
Yeah, I think part of what it did early on was, and it continues, is it allowed us both centrally and through partners like Great Minds to be able to come up with and develop support for a virtual environment that would not have been possible otherwise. So it would have meant each teacher coming up with their own version of what they should be presenting as, Unit 1, Lesson 4. And through that partnership, for example, we were able to work with Great Minds to develop videos where you had Great Minds teachers and professionals actually coming up with the videos, teaching some of the lessons. So in those days when, as you just referenced, the digital divide was even greater, it allowed us to use, cable TV, local TV to actually broadcast those lessons. It also meant that the sharing across platforms with teachers who were already overburdened with just, oh my God, my life has shifted personally and professionally. How do I navigate this? It meant that there was a lot less mind lift that had to be done around adaptation and much more focus on what does high quality teaching of this content, these materials look like. And Pierre Butts, who's one of our Teachers of the Year in Baltimore City, wrote a wonderful piece on that from a teacher perspective. And he talks about how that freed him from having to kind of come up with his own hodgepodge of different lessons and adaptation, and allowed him to really focus on the things that teachers know matter, like making sure all of his kids were okay, developing those relationships, and knowing kind of where he was going to pick up in a standards aligned way.
Mm-hmm. The irony is I was following Sonia for a couple of years before I actually got to meet her through Chiefs for Change because of the work that she was doing. In 2018, in August, we launched our strategic plan, and one of our strategic priorities is addressing student achievement, and literacy was at the top. But when we think about literacy in light of both pandemics that we're experiencing, whether we talk about the COVID crisis that we're in or the racial injustice, I strongly believe that in order to address our issues, we've got to give our students the gift of literacy. And so in that being a goal, when everything was happening, it would have been easy to just step away, to say, you know what, we have to deal with COVID, we have to deal with racial injustice, we're not going to launch our curriculum this year. So this is year one for Aldine. And of course, that was never an option because we recognize that is a solution to some of the areas in which we're going into. And so I'm so proud. It's probably one of the things that I'm most proud of is the partnership with Great Minds and Wit and Wisdom and launching our new curriculum, because had we not done it, the idea of the issues that we were trying to correct, teachers going out and finding lessons from Pinterest to teachers helping teachers, and all of those other different things. But no matter where our students are learning, whether they're learning at school or learning at home, to have the foundation of high quality instructional materials has definitely been powerful. And so it's a sense of pride. So whether I'm watching a class online or watching a class face-to-face, just proud of the work that our team's done internally in our district, but the amount of support that we've gotten from our partners to be able to respond in a way that we didn't have the manpower nor the knowledge or capacity to do while facing this crisis. And so who launches a new curriculum during COVID? Of course, we do. But it's one of the things that I'm most proud of. Our teachers have been very responsive. It's probably one of the things, again, prior to COVID, most of our students didn't even have access to own grade level learning materials and to go in and they're reading and excited about it. And it just gives me great joy even during this crisis.
Carrie, you've done a great deal of work at the state level to think through how to incentivize school districts to adopt high quality materials. Can you talk a little bit about what's happened in that area of your work so far, what you think the next phase of that work might be?
Sure. I want to just capitalize on 2 points that LaTanya just made. And one is about partnerships, because I don't think anybody could do this work without partnerships. And I'm going to talk about ours in just 1 second. But the other thing we've realized, I think superintendents across the United States have realized that, in the era of COVID and disruption, it's also a great time for opportunity. So I think it's the way you look at it, and LaTanya seized it, Sonia seized it, and provided great products for their students. And so we did the same thing. We partnered with Mississippi First, who's a really good partner with us, to set up a website because we wanted teachers to have greater access to high quality instructional materials. So the website is called Mississippi Instructional Materials Matter. And it's up and running. It's a centralized repository, if you will, right now for math and social studies teachers. That's where we started, to make sure that when they go there, they're going to find materials that are vetted, materials that have been assured that are aligned to our standards. That's one thing I think that concerned a lot of us, with teachers kind of grabbing stuff off the internet, not really having an idea whether or not, through no fault of their own, just not really assured that it was aligned to our standards. And we wanted them to have a place to go to make sure that what they were using was aligned to our standards. Our staff has reviewed this. We started first with that, training our own reviewers, if you will, to make sure that they were knowing how to look at that, knowing what to look. We used Ed Reports as a rubric. They put out a lot of really good stuff, and we borrowed from them, if you want to say. We started this whole project back actually in 2017. The whole idea of looking at HQIM through the lens of standardized, matched against our standards, I guess is what I'm going to say. And we wanted a place for teachers and districts to go, rather than just going out and purchasing something that they weren't sure, that we could then give them a place to go that they could be rest assured that it was aligned, that it was rigorous, and it was of high quality. So we were in a group of about 7 states. CCSSO sponsored it, and so we were all able to share what we were doing with each other and then establish this website. We started, as I said, with math and social studies and the arts, quite honestly, and we are then moved into mathematics, and we are right now in the middle of ELA, and those will be available for the 21-22 school year. And so we're continuing to work to make sure that website stays current and that teachers can go there very easily and find exactly what they need. I think that's the important part for us is teachers are stressed as it is. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, you've got 2 wonderful examples here of where you've been able to put materials in teachers' hands. Mm-hmm. And at the state, we're not really able to do that. But what we are able to do is to develop these kinds of resources that teachers can have confidence that if they don't have them at their local level, there's a place they can go and get it at the state level so that they can use it in their classrooms.
Carrie, I want to ask a follow-up, which, and all of us should weigh in on this, around literacy. You've done early literacy work in Mississippi that I think has turned heads across the nation based on the science of reading. This is something I've talked to all 3 of you about, really trying to speak with clarity about the science of reading, what good reading instruction looks like in the early grade levels. Could you talk a little bit about what the span of that work has been in Mississippi and how it's going? And then LaTanya, Sonia, I'd love to talk with you also about that work in your districts.
Yeah, that's really been just a labor of love for us. I have to say that from the bottom of my heart. It's really been a pre-K through grade 3 effort. And we decided very early on that we wanted to ensure that all of our teachers knew how to teach the foundational skills of reading or the science of reading, because I was hearing from principals that teachers were not showing up ready day 1. And so we then decided as a state that we were going to take this on as a statewide initiative. And so we then used the money that we were given from the legislature to train required training for all K-3 general ed and special ed teachers as well as administrators, because I felt language was important and everybody needed to be speaking from the same voice. So we have continued to do that every single year, that everybody gets that same training. And in addition to that, they also get training with phonics first. That's another part of it as well. And in addition to that, they get the resources that they need at the school site in order to be able to implement this. We've hired literacy coaches that we have put out across the state in our most needy schools. We've got professional development coordinators that go out and provide PD just in time to all of our principals that need it based on their own data. We've been continuing to add additional resources as we've gone on. We've hired early childhood coaches now that can go out in public or private settings in our pre-K so that they know exactly what good instruction should look like and can follow through and model for our pre-K teachers. We've provided all of our professional development for free. So anybody in the state that touches 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds can come to any of the professional development that we provide for free. I tell you, it's really the positive feedback we have received from teachers. You know, they may have gone into it thinking, what is this all about? But now that they're on the other side, they say this is the best professional development that they've ever received. And they feel so confident now in knowing how to teach little ones how to read.
Listen, I'm hoping that Texas follows suit. This past year, I think some of the greatest direction that our state is going in is the foundations of teaching reading is required for all pre-K through 3 teachers. In addition to that, as I was transitioning into Aldine a couple of years ago, one of the questions that I was asked over and over was, what are you going to do about reading? What are you going to do about literacy? And any superintendent who's worth their weight looks at the data. And when you look at the data and you see that only 28% of your students are reading on grade level by 3rd grade, and we know that literacy is the gateway to opportunity, I can't talk about graduating with choices and opportunity until we've addressed literacy. And so it's been a journey, 2-year journey for us, about 18 months of looking, listening, and learning about what was happening here, and then how do we move forward. And so as we were thinking about how to best move forward and the best prepare our students, what was evident is we needed a vision for literacy, a vision, a literacy framework. And as we were thinking about we knew that we needed to have some phonics space. We knew that we needed to have something that was going to help with everything. And so long story short, it wasn't something that I mandated down, and I'm proud of that. It was something that through our collective work and looking at the best way to address the literacy issues in our district, we were able to step away from a popular balanced literacy program that was not working for students. And literally during a crisis in the middle of COVID, we are seeing gains. We're seeing teachers respond exactly as Carrie has said. We are with our partners. We have support. In addition to just adopting and going a new way with literacy, we also provide the literacy coaches and the different support at each level, just-in-time PD. And we are very proud that we've had a successful launch even during COVID. And I'm hoping to have those gains that Sonia experienced in her first year of implementation.
Sonia, this is something which can be controversial, but shouldn't be controversial, right? What does this work look like in Baltimore?
No, and I mean, I would just give a shout out just to Carrie, LaTanya, all of us who really have just confronted what the elephant in the room was. And that was a reluctance to go against what was popular, what felt good, what made people feel academic, but was not yielding gains for kids. And, one of the things that I know we've all done, and the way we began the work in Baltimore City was really linking this to our, frankly, our racial justice work. Like, we looked at the history of what people of color were denied in terms of literacy. And oftentimes, I think what happens is we're trying to verify someone's method that was kind of cooked up on the side without looking, as LaTanya said, at the data. And so, coming in to Baltimore City and having 13%, I don't care if it's college or career ready standards or anything,
Right.
13%, you are saddling young people to, a life of nothing. I mean, I hate to put it that bluntly. And so what we had to really do is be comfortable having a point of view. And what I found when I came was people were dancing around the edges. Well, how can we keep a little bit of guided reading? And I'll be straight with you. I had to wean people off, right? So first it was, but can I keep these levels and still do the deep phonics, right? So you had to kind of wean them off of that. And then finally, I remember having a real straight conversation with some of our literacy coaches and saying, look, I get you might not believe this. I get you might not want to do this. There are plenty of other districts where you can do the thing you've always done. You just can no longer do that in Baltimore City. And what we found was when we actually combined to what Carrie and LaTanya was saying, the actual building of knowledge, we had teachers who said to us, oh my God, all this time, I can't believe, one, what I didn't know, two, what I thought about children as a result of what I didn't know. And let's just call the elephant out in the room. When you serve large numbers of low-income students, of students of color, it is easier to say there's something wrong with the kids than there is with my practice. And what we tried to do was create the space to say to teachers, it's not your fault, as both Carrie and LaTanya have said, but now that we know better, we have to do better. And I remember like having this conversation early, and for the first time, I'm 52 years old. It wasn't until we were 2 years into this work that my mother, who grew up in Jim Crow, Georgia, turned to me and said, in the Black schools where we were, they wouldn't let you teach phonics. And I said, excuse me? She said, oh, no, the Black schools couldn't teach phonics. We could only do whole sight word reading. And when I started uncovering the history of that, because when you get the foundational pieces you actually can read, and tied it to a very concrete justice right goal, it became a lot easier for people to relinquish what they had been taught. But I will tell you, we had to do some weaning in the early years. People didn't want to let go of their guided reading levels. But can I call this child an X, right? and aren't they an M level? And I'm like, but if the fluency isn't there, I don't care. And so a lot of what I think you're hearing is that the investment that we've all had to make, I frankly wish I had the state level investment that these two women are talking about. We had to kind of create our own. As a matter of fact, you guys will get a chuckle that I gave our early literacy director a copy of Carrie's Institute in Mississippi. And I was like, here, just read this, and then we'll make our own. But I do think some of it is we have been scared to have a point of view. And we have to have a point of view and be able to push back. And I think that's what you're seeing now. You're seeing people push back and say, it's not good enough to just peddle your product.
Okay.
You have to be able to show results with kids.
That's right.
I think the more exciting thing about this is just the through line that you've been able to communicate between your early literacy work and the rich, rigorous, culturally relevant curriculum in ELA that you're using at the middle and high school level, that there really is a through line there that you can demonstrate.
No, absolutely. And that needs to be there, because if not, you end up getting campy, right? You end up landing in a camp instead of looking at the full trajectory of where we want young people to be with regards to their agency and their options. And you're right, like that, we could get on that another time, but the whole piece of teaching process as opposed to teaching content, and what we allowed ourselves to believe about the teaching of history and science and geography as being somehow secondary and not really essential, when the whole time all we were doing was depleting the soil of the classroom from all of its minerals, right? Like if you don't have anything to hang that knowledge on, then all you're doing is kind of what I say doing reading theater, right? You're pretending as if you have a depth of knowledge that you don't, and it's not the child's fault. It's our fault because we stripped out all of the nutrients of content from the soil, and the ones who have been left bereft of the skills that come with that are the ones that are least likely to get it from home. And it's not fair, because that's what public education was designed to do. Public education was not designed to say, we'll give you a little something on the side and we want your family to take care of it. Public education in this country was designed to say, regardless of what your family might be able to bring to the table, we have an additive value. And right now, in a lot of ways, we've dropped the ball on that additive value.
But Sonia, I think that the reason that it's okay is because it's happening to our Black, brown, and students of poverty. That's the reason why it's been okay. When I think about even in our district after George Floyd and that incident, I pulled all of some of our male African-American leaders in our district, because everyone was wondering, what are you going to say? What are you going to say? And it was important for me to figure out what we were going to do. And there was a high school principal, and he said, you know what, Dr. Goffney, we've got to do something about literacy. He said, I'm thinking about this child. He said his name. He said he has he's been getting in trouble. And he said, I went and looked at his CUME folder. And when I looked at his CUME folder, he was reading on a first or second grade level. And so, and if you go through his CUME folder, you see that he started getting in trouble at third and fourth grade, getting ISS and school suspension. And then he started getting in trouble with the law. And so he said, we've got to address literacy. I think literacy is the biggest civil rights issue of our time. And the reason why we are not making progress and there's not a lot of push is because I don't know who a whole language is working for or who it has worked for, but I know who it hasn't worked for. Mm-hmm. And so getting clear about how we move forward. And I mean, when you look at our NAEP results, when you look at our Texas STAR results, I was in a meeting actually, and we were talking about how Mississippi was now kicking Texas's butt. So Carrie, we were not happy about that, but it does give me hope that we're doing the right work and we're doing it for the right purpose and with our students. So
can I just follow-up thought? Yeah, I wanted just to add one other thing to that, because to Sonia's point and also to LaTonya's point, you know, teachers, I believe in my heart of hearts that teachers come into the school each and every day wanting to do the very best that they can. Mm-hmm. And I believe it's my job as the state chief to try to help build their capacity, because there are some that come in, they got it. They hit the ground running. They know what they're doing. They've had a great educator prep program, or they've come from a great training. And so for the way we approached it, we knew that there were some teachers that just simply did not know how to teach the foundational skills of reading. That wasn't their fault. But I can remember even seeing, coming back from sessions with teachers with tears in their eyes saying, I had no idea. Like, I had no idea. And to Sonia's point, it was so much easier just to blame kids than it was to really reflect, but it wasn't their fault. They simply did not have the knowledge to do that. And so now that's the one thing I feel so strongly about. And to LaTonya's point, we are now having middle school teachers and high school teachers saying, ooh, can you send me through this training? Because I've got little ones in my classroom in middle school and in high school that don't know how to read. And I don't know how to diagnose it. I'm the math teacher, or I'm the history teacher. And so we're saying absolutely. So we're trying to develop a strand of training for middle school and high school teachers, and also teaching them how to use that and build that into their schedule so that they're not feeling like their content's getting lost because they don't see themselves as teachers of reading, but they know they need to be teachers of reading in order to teach math and science and history and all the wonderful things that Sonia was talking about.
You know, I think I can't think of a better way to explain the problem that we've created, that we have high school math and history teachers saying, you need to help me go back to the drawing board on literacy. So for our audience, I mean, there's no better example of the pickle that we're in. And it's just so great to hear the work you all are doing to lead us forward. Just one other question from me, and then we've got a couple of questions from the audience as well. I'm curious to know how, if at all, the roles of adults in your schools have shifted during this time, in particularly in terms of supporting students and in terms of teachers supporting each other around instruction. Okay. Anyone can jump in.
I know for us, one of the things that we always, because we have 82 schools, and one of the things that's been obvious since day one is the importance of leadership, and that leadership matters, because each one of our principals were charged with designing a school that fit the needs of their communities, because at some of our schools, 70% of our students were going to remain at home while 30% were coming to school, or 10%. And so it varied differently. And we wanted to maintain the connection with our families, regardless of whether they were learning at home or at school. And so we had to utilize our highly effective teachers, the ones who were highly effective with face-to-face in a different way, and provide them with the support. Either they had more students, they had different students, or they were providing support and recording lessons for other students. In addition, those that were very good in the virtual environment, they were making sure that they would have support staff, but they were also required to have a larger class size than normal. And because it's been all hands on deck as far as meeting the social needs of our students, but it was also important to pull the parents in. So there was no more donuts with dads and muffins with moms. We were actually having to roll out a family engagement process that included our parents as teachers for our students who were learning at home. One of the things that roadblocks that we avoided, thankfully, is at the beginning when we were coming back and we were thinking about how are we going to deal with substitutes. considering lots of different things as a result of COVID. So we hired substitutes at the beginning of the year, and they went through all of the training with our teachers. So they're not seen as substitutes, they're seen as part of the process. Our special education teachers who used to be more operate independently, they're working with our gen ed teachers to provide all students with the support. It's powerful when you see them preparing, and I'm talking fast because I don't want to leave anything out, but I think that everybody's role, it's been, when we say all hands on deck and we say all in for all dean, it has truly been magnified with COVID. And one of the things that we're looking at coming out is opportunity culture, because we recognize with COVID slide and all the different pandemics that we faced in this last year that we're going to have to do things differently, and we're going to have to maximize the effectiveness or the reach of our highly effective teachers. And so we're looking at how we can utilize stipends differently, how we can utilize our highly effective teachers differently with support, and how we can have some of those grow your own with some of those highly effective paraprofessionals who've done an incredible job because they know our students and get them on the path to certification. And so I think this whole pandemic has caused us to look at all staff differently.
Yeah, I'll follow up just quickly. One of the things that our initiative, because we now have devices across the entire state in all teachers and students' hands, to LaTanya's point about using our highly effective teachers, we have a teacher shortage. Nationally, we have a teacher shortage. So we're looking at how then do I use a teacher in the northwest part of the state that's teaching, let's say, algebra, and she's knocking it out of the park. But a district in the southwest part of the state couldn't find an algebra teacher if their life depended on it. So how can I beam that teacher in to that class on a daily basis so that these kids are getting a highly qualified teacher teaching algebra on a regular basis? And then since we've given that district funds for that teacher that they can't find, how about part of that money going back to that teacher in the northwest part who's now assumed more responsibility? She's getting a stipend for it. She can add that, you know, in terms of an endorsement, if you will. So we're trying to think of it really out of the box about how do we spread the wealth of these amazing teachers that we have to districts that can't find teachers and can't find really highly qualified teachers. And the other thing that we did was we partnered with the Mississippi Public Broadcasting Company, and they even went out and launched a brand new channel to help us out. So we had 2 full channels going all day with teachers teaching lessons, with teachers. I mean, it was amazing. I mean, when you think about people stepping forward in partnerships, I mean, we've always had a partnership, but this like blew it out of the water. And so now we are working on an ongoing basis for them because we knew all kids had access to TV, right? But they didn't necessarily have access to the internet. So we figured that would be one way to kind of solve that problem as well. So at the state level, it's a little bit different with staffing models than it is at a district, but we just started at the state level with producing all kinds of resources for our teachers, virtual professional development, and all that entailed. But we involved our teachers in the work because that's really where I think you get the biggest buy-in. Is it's teachers working for teachers.
Yeah, and I would just affirm a lot of what both LaTanya and Carrie have described. I think early on in the spring, when we had our first successful 5th grade teacher, math teacher, actually begin then teaching across 5th grade math across 15 schools within her cohort. We saw what happens when you disrupt what the data says is very clear, that the greatest discrepancy in quality teaching is actually not school to school, it's classroom to classroom. And so when you break down the walls of that classroom and actually give access to the highest quality teachers, it can be, you know, depending on how you do it, it can be threatening. Like I remember when we did that in the spring, and a couple of the other teachers are like, so what are you saying about my teaching, right? If I'm not now the one that is the lead teacher. I think what it's pushed us to do is reevaluate the money, frankly, that we had invested in a very, very different teacher's contract years ago, 6 years ago, with differentiated pay for differentiated models, but not having the actual designation of different duties to match what we kind of officially said within the contract. What this has allowed us to do is to say, actually it's okay to be a teacher that's better with small groups of students, right? And to come in after a really skilled teacher does what I would traditionally call the upfront, right? The lesson set, and then have other teachers come around with smaller groups of students. Actually, we were seeing increased leverage when we actually changed the roles of everyone. And I think some of what LaTanya was saying, we found in our supervised learning site, virtual learning sites, we have now bus monitors, in addition to our paraprofessionals, who want to go back into education. Because what they're saying is they are members of the communities where our kids live. And so they don't pack up their car every day and go 30 minutes to another county. These are people who live in Baltimore City, who see these children every day, and now they have a lens into what's going on. And they're the ones who in between breaks are taking kids off to the side. And, you know, I had one bus monitor say to me, Dr. S, I don't know if I'm going to get in trouble, but I just want you to know, I saw this little person over here was struggling during that lesson. So I just said, during your break, you're going to work with me on the web sounds. And so I think the other piece is we're also changing the definition of teacher. There are people in the community who actually, I don't have to leap over their belief system. I don't have to get them to believe, as LaTanya said earlier, that little black and brown children are capable. And frankly, they actually, in some cases, have a greater belief innately in what children can do than some of the folks I'm hiring with 3 and 4 degrees. So I think the other piece we've got to push on is the formality of who we call a teacher and what it means to be a teacher, and that it's okay to have differentiated roles. And it's frankly been a mobilizing cry for different sectors of the community, as the community owns the education of its children. It doesn't cede it to an institution, but it owns, again, the education of its young people. And I think that's part of the distance that we have the ability to really leverage and cover that distance, because we've got a whole lot, we've got generational disenfranchisement from schools. And let's just call that what it is. We have grandparents and parents who were not comfortable coming into school buildings. And so part of that meant we were saying to them, we're the experts, thank you. We got this. And frankly, the data says we didn't have it.
Right.
And so, you know, but what we're finding is when you actually change the role of teacher to be more inclusive, you actually get better results because you have a community educating its children, not just an institution educating children.
I think it's a great point, Sonia. We talk quite a bit about culturally relevant curriculum and the need for mirrors, so to speak, within the curriculum where students see themselves in what they're learning. But that extends to the adults in their school building and the power of being able to interact every day with adults who share some of the lived experiences that our students share is really, really powerful. Wanted to ask a couple of questions that have come from our audience. And the first one is about parents. A lot of curiosity about what parental outreach has looked like during this time. To what degree does your work with parents hold potential for improving student learning in this moment when so many students are learning from home?
I think it goes back to what I said a moment ago. You know, we, as a principal, we all did donuts for dads, and we did, you know, all of the muffins for moms. And so it's changed the way we engage parents. One of the things that we found out immediately was, you know, sometimes I have a hard time turning my own computer on and I need assistance. And so we had to make sure that our Family and Community Engagement Office, which we just launched as part of our student priorities this year, they started to work immediately during COVID, providing training for both all of our parents, and we had to have a bilingual training as well as the regular training once a week in order to address questions and have that ongoing communication. In addition, we partnered with the county to have a help hotline because we're not here 24/7. And, you know, our parents are hardworking parents. They're working shifts and different things. So in the evenings, they would have questions on how to support their student or how to turn on the iPad or how to do different things. And so through that partnership, we were able to provide them with that support. In addition, just an understanding. We talk about literacy, and I know I follow Sonia's work. One of the things that was really important as she launched the curriculum was making sure parents understood, because the way we were taught, literacy is totally different from how our students are learning. And so we found that we've got to make sure our parents are trained in a different way. And so I think, and I'm hopeful that this will continue on even post-COVID, of having our parents at the table. And keep in mind too, and one of the things we have to remind our teachers was the fact that homes were not classrooms, whereas a teacher in the past may not have come to the school. Parents were listening to what was happening in the classrooms, and they were, listen, I was getting quite a bit of feedback, whether good or bad, and especially on the bad, if something happened that was not up to snuff. So there was a level of accountability that's totally different.
Yeah, I just agree with LaTanya. That level, that visibility into that screen just opened up a whole lot of doors for a whole lot of folks. I will just add one piece, and that is I had at least a handful of principals who told me that just being in a virtual environment, seeing kids' families, interacting, getting questions. There's been a couple of virtual classrooms I visited where, a grandmother will peek into the screen and ask the teacher a question, right? A couple of those principals have shared it's been the best professional development on family engagement that their teachers have received, because teachers are coming back and saying families do care, right? I mean, on both sides, you're going to see things that aren't great. But by and large, the stories we've heard have been from teachers who say, wow, like I just know so much more about this student. And, to the point, LaTanya made, it's not all about coming to the muffins for mom. It's, I'm peeking in, making sure everything's going right, having communication. And so I think that there's some real opportunities to do, to really engage parents in very different ways than we have before. But this theme of parents across zip codes care about their kids. And the virtual space has allowed people to see that.
The one thing that we did as a state, we've got a website. It's a pretty robust website, Mississippi Succeeds. And so we put a lot of age-appropriate, grade-appropriate activities there, so that parents could go, whether it was an ELA or math, and select the grade. And there's a ton of activities in that they could do with their families at home. We also really increased our social media. Because we realized that we were surprised, quite honestly, at how many were following our Twitter, how many were following our Facebook, and so we've really tried to add more materials that are more easily accessible to parents from the state, because we're not there boots on the ground at those individual schools and in those individual districts. So we had to also prepare a module, we've prepared several actually, to send to districts so that they could conduct their own parent information nights around technology and how to use the technology. So we took it a little bit differently, because at the state level it is a little bit different, but we did try to make sure that our parents had as much information as we were also giving our district, quite honestly. So if it was good resource materials for teachers, then we made sure it was on our social media for parents as well.
So I have one final question from the audience, which is, did you have to make any difficult decisions around what subject areas you were covering over the course of this fall semester, let's say, given the time constraints of folks who are from home and maybe can't be on Zoom for 6 straight hours? Did you make decisions around what subject areas would be covered? Did you prioritize in certain ways?
I think for us, it wasn't the subject areas. It was, we know that synchronous is the best, we felt like that would be a better model, but it wasn't an option for us because, number one, initially all of our families didn't have devices, and so we wanted to respect our families. And number two, just recognizing the challenges of devices. And so we did an asynchronous model for our students who are learning at home, and then our teachers set up office hours where they can have access. So we have all of the different requirements, the same requirements as face-to-face, but so we didn't eliminate any subjects per se. And I hope I understood that correctly.
Yeah,
Great.
Go ahead, Carrie. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I would say similarly, it was more about timing. It was about cutting anything out. We were real clear that starting in the fall, we really wanted to prioritize having students get exposure to all of what they would be getting while they were in in-person learning. I do think one of the shifts, as LaTanya said, around time is, my folks pushed me, my principals pushed me for greater flexibility. And, I can be hard-nosed when it comes to, look, we're supposed to be giving kids instruction. But I will say, to their credit, we've also built out models, again, through some of our strongest teachers, about what are some of the other ways of using time in the school day that, because of a pandemic, and I love LaTanya saying the pandemics, plural, that we are undergoing, other ways of connecting. So it meant more time, and we're getting ready to roll this out for K-8. We started with high school, more time, for example, for small group rap groups and things that like we would not have always done in the same way, but that now we're finding are crucial, right? Some of our young people who just were not connecting. I mean, we had kids coming back, handing us back laptops and saying, this ain't working for me. I need to be back in school. And so, part of how you re-engage, when we heard, was more of that time. Some of our kids are getting better college counseling. Our counseling department has done a fabulous job revamping that time, not necessarily the content, but, being on a screen 6 hours straight, we know you've got to mix it up. And what we actually are finding, and Mike probably knows this, is we actually have higher FOFSA rates than we have in years past because of that small group time that we're using differently. So I would just echo LaTanya's piece about, like, I don't think we're trying to, drop anything. We've emphasized certain things, but it's really been the time allotted to different things and the structure and flexibility. And, you had a hard-nosed CEO who had to give up some ground on some stuff. And actually her people taught her that they were right and I was wrong. So that's a good thing always.
Yeah, I think it's a panel for another time, but the supports that we're providing right now to graduating seniors are so important to their life outcomes. And it's made a huge difference in the lives of so many kids during this time when it's been done well.
Absolutely.
Well, so many takeaways from this conversation for me. I'll offer two to the audience. One, which is obvious, which is that leadership matters, and it matters in this moment more than ever. So just thank the three of you for everything you're doing to lead your communities through this, to lead your students to success. And then the second, which I'll just underscore from our conversation, is that the science of reading has to inform our early literacy work. It is an equity issue of the highest importance. And you can learn from our panelists today. Certainly, we've done a lot of work on this at Chiefs for Change, but I am looking forward to supporting our members in that work going forward, because I just think it's so important. Thank you very much for being here today. Appreciate all of you. Stay well, and to the audience, we'll see you soon.
Thanks. Thanks to my friends. See you, Sonia. See you, Sonia.
Bye, Carrie. Thank you, Mike.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.